What happens when a girl who has been cast out of her family hides a wounded man in her barn? She doesn't know who he is and doesn't expect any thanks. But when the soldiers come for him, everything she believed in collapses in the most unexpected way. The water in the trough was icy, with gray bubbles at the bottom. Sophia wrung out a man's shirt, unfamiliar, rough, smelling of someone else, and laid it on a stone nearby. Her hands ached from the cold, but she said nothing. Everything around her was familiar. The wind blowing through the cracks, the soot in the corner, the cries from the farm below. The house where she no longer lived was visible across the river, with white curtains that she had not been allowed to take with her. Her family lived there. There, they heated the stove, ate bread and butter, and called her dead while alive. Sophia lived in an outbuilding behind the garden of an old shepherd, for whom she cleaned boots and washed floors. For food. She got up before everyone else so she wouldn't hear the children pointing at her. She went to the river, washed other people's tablecloths, then washed the floor in the shop, and then back to the river. It was the same every day. And every day ended with her looking at her former home, as if it were a museum with curtained windows. Today was laundry day. Tomorrow was bread day. She baked small flatbread on a tin sheet, not for herself, but for an elderly woman whose stove had burned down. Sophia brought her a bundle, left it at the door, and didn't wait for thanks. Not because she didn't want it, but because she knew there would be no thanks. Only a look. One that said it all. You are a disgrace. You betrayed your father. You have no right to look me in the eye. She returned home to the barn, which smelled of mice and had walls covered with burlap. There was a bucket, a straw mattress, and a small mirror cracked in half. Her face was reflected in it, like two different women, one still alive, the other already defeated. Water was boiling in the shepherd's kitchen. He was wheezing and swearing at the cat. Sophia silently handed him a spoon, wiped the table, and returned to her place. No one thanked her. No one called her by name. Even when they saw her, they called her that girl, or simply she. And then there was a knock, but not on the door, on her heart. She went to the river because she heard a crunch, and she saw it. Someone was lying in the mud among the reeds. Sophia's whole life stopped for a second, because that someone was alive and wounded. You've always been too soft, said old Greta, breathing hoarsely. That's why they wiped you out, like a rag. Sophia sat at her feet, washing her feet. It was hard for the old woman to stand, and Sophia came every evening to help, silently, without asking. Greta paid her with silence, but today, for some reason, she spoke. In life, it's like this. Either you go, or they come for you. And you're one of those who lies down so that others can be soft, she said, and stared at the ceiling. Don't cry. Not now. Not in front of me. Sophia didn't cry. She didn't dare. But her heart beat loudly. The phrase was like a blow to the soul. Too soft. Too submissive. Too, if someone needs it, I'll give it away. Yes, she was like that. And now what? Here she was, in a basement where even a cat wouldn't want to live. In the evening, she returned to the shed. She lit a candle. She put a blanket on the stranger she had found by the river. He was delirious. His lips were dry. His chest rose and fell unevenly. Sophia changed the bandage on his side. She was shaking with fear, but she did everything she could. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't even move. And she sat next to him, like at the bedside of a sick child. You're a stranger, she whispered in the darkness. And I don't belong to anyone. Her old jacket hung on the wall, from the time when she was a daughter. In the pocket was an old note. In clumsy letters, in a child's handwriting, it read, Sophia, I want to be like you. You are the kindest. It was written by her younger sister, back then, many years ago, when she still called her by her name, when she wasn't afraid to sit at the same table with her. Now, her sister didn't even say hello. She just looked away when she passed by. They all looked away. Sophia went to the mirror. The same crack, the same two halves of her face. Only now, one of them was sitting next to a half-dead man, wrapping him in her last jacket. What if he was one of them, she whispered. What if they come for him? No one had taught her how to make decisions. She had been told, listen to your father. Think like your mother. Don't disgrace the family. And now she was her own father and her own judge. The wind howled outside. It was cold in the barn, but Sophia didn't leave, because this man was alive, and everything that is alive, even if beaten and dirty, should not die alone. It was not in her nature. During the day, Sophia cleaned the old shepherd's barn. He was mute, except when he cursed everything that was alive, including himself. His name was Thomas, but no one remembered his real name anymore. He just was. He walked with a hook instead of a leg, ate porridge from the same bowl, and kept quiet Sophia in the barn like an unwanted shadow. She paid for her shelter with her labor, floors, livestock, the stove. Everything that the shepherd's wife, who had died 10 years ago, had done. Living with him was not scary. He did not look at her, did not engage in conversation, was not interested in where she had been at night or why there was a basin with dirty bandages in her corner. Sometimes her younger brother Matteo came to the village. Now he was father's son, heir, helper, voice. He didn't look her in the eye. Only once, when she was washing the steps on the porch, did he whisper, "If only you had kept quiet back then." She didn't answer. Back then, that was the evening when her father brought the old widower into the house and said, "Sophia, you will be his wife. He will give you a roof over your head, and he will help us." And she replied, "No." Just one word, and it cost her everything. Her mother cried. Her father slammed the door. Her sister hid. Her brother left. And she stayed. Until morning. And then her things were already standing at the door. No words. No goodbye. All the silence of that night still lingered in her, like stale water in a jug. Now, every time she passed that house, she felt something in her chest that wasn't anger. No, it was worse. Emptiness, as if her relatives had died, but continued to live only so that she would remember what they had once called her. In the shop where she washed the floor, the saleswoman whispered to her, "She could have lived like a queen, and now she carries dirt from other people's shoes. It's her own fault." She let her head get too big. The children in the village pointed at her. They said, "That's the one who quarreled with her father." Even those who had been her friends turned away, as if she were an outcast. It was contagious. She didn't try to explain anything, because words are useless when you've already been written off, when all that's left behind your name is a shadow and shame. And in the barn, the shadow breathed, quietly, weakly. The wounded man hadn't regained consciousness. His forehead was hot, and his lips whispered incoherently. Sophia gave him water, covered him, changed his bandages. She did everything her mother had done for her as a child. Before that night. She didn't need to know who he was. All that mattered was that he was breathing, that he hadn't pushed her away, hadn't called her names, hadn't told her to be quiet. He just lay there. And he needed help. One morning, Sophia saw her sister at the gate, the same one who had written her the note. The girl stood wrapped in a scarf, staring at the barn. Their eyes met. Her sister nodded. Sophia didn't. And that was it. That, it, was more than words could say. Her sister left, and in the barn he stirred. for the first time. The knock on the door was not loud. It was confident. The kind of knock only those who know they will be let in make. Sophia froze. The wounded man had just begun to breathe more evenly. She moistened his lips, covered his face with a rag, and hid his shoulder under a blanket. Then she left. The door was thin. There was a hook on it that held nothing but habit. 4 men stood outside, in greatcoats, dirty, dusty, all with the same look in their eyes, a look that does not refuse. "Does anyone named Sophia live here?" one asked. His voice was like glass being carved. She nodded. "Were you at the river?" He looked at her face as if he already knew the answer. Sophia didn't answer, but her lips trembled. "We're looking for a man who left the assembly area. He's wounded. He may be unconscious. He may have been here." The third man, who had been silent, stepped closer. "Does your family live over there?" He pointed to a house across the river. "They said you don't talk to anyone." Sophia looked away slightly. Didn't hurt. It was familiar. "We have orders. We have to search every shed, every basement. It won't take long." "I have," she began and stopped. "I have an old man in the house, Thomas. He doesn't like strangers." "We know how to talk to people who don't like us," one of them replied without even smiling. They entered. Sophia remained standing at the door. Her hands wouldn't obey her. Everything inside her was burning, but it wasn't fear. Fear was yesterday. Today was different. Something heavy was pounding in her chest, like in those moments when her father was shouting and she hadn't left the dinner table, like when she had sat with her back straight while they were chasing her out. One of the soldiers lingered by the stove. Another one was by the piece of cloth where she had been drying bandages. The third one lifted a stool and looked under it, and the fourth one headed for the door to the utility room, the very same room where a man who shouldn't have been there was lying on a straw mattress. Sophia took a step forward, then another. "There. Mice," she said, "and a bucket." The soldier opened the door. The storeroom was dark. The air was stale. It smelled of hay, old blood, and something disturbing, like before a storm. The soldier stood still for a second, then stepped inside. Sophia watched as his back disappeared into the darkness, as a second soldier brought a lamp, as a third kept his hand on his belt, near his knife. She stood against the wall, not breathing. If he woke up, it would be over. If he groaned, it would be over too. If anyone saw the bandages, the clean shirt, the piece of bread on the stool, she would be interrogated. Worse, she would be sent back to her family, or to those worse than her family. The soldiers left. One of them was carrying something in his hand, a bag of dirty rags. He threw it at her feet and said only, "We'll continue. Don't leave this place." And they left. When the door closed, Sophia stood there for another minute, motionless. Then she abruptly slid the bolt, rushed into the storeroom, and bent over him. "Hush," she whispered. "Hush. It's okay. They're gone." He didn't answer. He just moved his fingers and sank back into the heat. Sophia sat down next to him. She took his hand in hers. It was heavy, but not hostile. It was foreign. "What am I doing?" She felt torn inside. It was the moment when she could have said, "I found him by accident. I wanted to call for help. He came himself." And that would have been it. They would have left her. Returned her to the shadows, to peace and silence. Or dragged her out, accused her, trampled her. She remembered how her father used to say, "The truth is a luxury. We are not among those who can afford it." She remembered how her mother had said without looking at her, "You won't change anything anyway. Better keep quiet." Sophia wanted to scream, but she just squeezed the wounded man's hand tighter. "You're alive. You're breathing. That means I'm doing the right thing," she said to herself in the darkness. Someone passed by outside again. Maybe soldiers. Maybe her brother. Maybe no one. But every sound was deafening. For the first time in a long time, Sophia didn't know what to do. The familiar pain was behind her. Ahead of her lay the unknown. There was no plan, no support, no right way. She wanted to choose silence, but for some reason she couldn't. In the morning, she didn't go to the river. For the first time in many months, she didn't go out for water, didn't show up at the shop, didn't clean up after the shepherd. She just stayed. Inside. Next to the one who was breathing barely audibly. He was delirious. He whispered words that made no sense. Sometimes her name, although she didn't call him that. The soldiers didn't return that day. But the shadows of their boots remained on the threshold, like charcoal marks. Sophia washed the floor with a rag, not for cleanliness, but for herself, to wipe away the fear, to stop thinking, to drown out her mother's voice in her head. Silence is salvation. In the evening, there was a knock at the window, not with a fist, but with fingers. She recognized the touch. It was childlike, even though many years had passed. "It's me," she said quietly, almost inaudibly. Her younger sister stood there with a bundle in her hands. Her eyes were filled with shame. Her movements were filled with memory. Sophia didn't open the door right away. She was boiling inside. Why had she come? Why now? Why with a bundle when she had been carrying a stone for years? "I can't stay long," her sister whispered. "They said that you got involved. With the wrong people." Sophia opened the door. Her sister's gaze immediately fell on his silhouette in the corner. He was lying there, motionless. Bandages, a cup of water, a blanket. "Is he alive?" Sophia nodded. "Why didn't you give him up?" "Would you have?" Silence, awkward, the damp breath of a foreign world in their shed. "Father said, if you don't come out, he'll tell the soldiers that you're lying." Sophia felt a tremor inside. Not fear, disgust. Her father had spoken again, threatened again. But she was not the same anymore. "Let him say it," she replied. "It's not up to him now." Her sister stared, unblinking. Her face was a battle, something that couldn't be hidden. She had been taught to be obedient. She had been taught to turn away. But now she stood on the porch of her exile and didn't leave. Sophia closed the door. Slowly, without anger, without fear, simply with a choice. On the third day after the search, Thomas entered the barn. For the first time, he did not grumble or kick the door. He simply knocked. "Is he still alive?" he asked. Sophia nodded silently. The old man came closer and stared at the wounded man. For a long time. His eyes were cloudy, but his gaze was sharp. "You're wiping his nose, and he might turn you in later," he said. And he added, "Or worse." She pressed her lips together, not in defense, but out of habit. But he sat down on the bench, quietly, weightless, as if he had wanted to talk for a long time but didn't know how. "When they took my grandmother away, I kept quiet," he began. "I thought, well, they'll bring her back." And then I didn't even remember how empty the house was. Sophia listened, not believing him. Tomas never talked about himself, only about chickens, firewood, rain. I thought silence would save me too, but it only numbs you. He took a piece of cheese from his pocket and put it on the table. "Not for him. It's for you. I can see you're falling apart. Sophia felt something inside her weaken. A trifle. Cheese. Words. A simple gesture. Not protection. Not affection. Just presence. "They'll be looking for him," Tomas said. "But don't be afraid. If anything, I didn't see anything. I didn't know anything." He stood up. He walked to the door. He stopped. "You're not that girl anymore. You're a human being." When he left, Sophia sat crouched by the stove for a long time. She watched the fire lick the logs. She thought about how no one had ever called her a human being. Not her mother. Not her brother. Not those who had built a house out of rules. But the old man had. The wounded man stirred. His eyes opened for a second. Helpless. Blue. Frozen. "Hush," she said. "I'm here." He nodded weakly and fell asleep again. It was raining outside. Inside, the stove was burning, and between them sat a girl who had nothing, except what no one could take away from her, the choice to remain human. The wounded man slowly regained consciousness. His first words were fragments. "Water. There was. Don't let." Sophia didn't ask any questions. She just gave him water, changed his bandages, put a soft cloth under his head. He didn't know who she was, and that was a relief. She could have been just a voice, a hand, a shadow, not the one whose family everyone knew. Not that Sophia. A few days later, he spoke. He sat up. He ate a spoonful of soup. His name was Elias. He didn't ask where he was. He just stared. Long, intently, as if trying to remember a face he didn't know. "You knew that he began. "No," she replied. "I didn't care." He wanted to laugh, but he grimaced. "It hurt. You're strange." "I'm not strange. I just stayed." Sometimes he fell asleep with her hand in his. Not like someone in love. Like someone who, for the first time in a long time, felt that there was someone alive and caring nearby. Sophia let him. Then she took her hand away when he was asleep. She baked bread again. She did the laundry again. Only now she took breaks to boil herbs, wash bandages, and pour water. Tomas didn't ask. Only once did he leave a piece of fish at the door, without a word. Once, passing by the bench, she heard one woman say to another, "She has someone now. He sits in the shed and never comes out. Maybe she found comfort." And for the first time, Sophia didn't turn away. She looked straight ahead, into their eyes, and walked on without lowering her head. She began to speak. To Elias. With Thomas. Even with herself. Not out loud, seriously. Not to defend herself. Out of necessity. "I never thought I could be without them," she admitted once. "But now I think maybe I've always been without them. I just didn't know it." Elias stared at the ceiling. "And now you want to go back?" "No. I want them to know that I exist, and that I'm not a mistake." Sometimes in the evenings, she would sit by the stove. He would sit on the hay. They would be silent. Then he would play something on an old wooden whistle he had carved himself. The melody was as soft as a baby's voice, sad and beautiful. She closed her eyes, and she heard her childhood in it. The one where her mother still kissed her forehead, and her father laughed. Once Elias said, "I can't stay. If they come." "I know," she replied. "But while you're here, I'm not alone." And he nodded, without words, like a person who knows that gratitude is not in words, but in silence. But in the morning, Thomas came in and said, "They're in the village again. They're searching. They're asking questions. This time, they're not being quiet." The morning was sticky. The wind blew sharply, as if it knew it was carrying news. Tomas said. They're at your father's house. Talking to him. For a long time. Loudly. Sophia stood silently by the window, looking at the river. It was murky, like her thoughts. Elias breathed quietly behind her. He was able to get up now. He even tried to go out into the yard, but his legs gave way. He'll turn you in, said Tomas. Not because he hates you, but because he's used to choosing what saves himself. She nodded. No tears, no questions, as if she had always known. Only now had she heard it out loud. A couple of hours later, her sister arrived, without a word. In her hands was an old letter. I can't take it anymore, she whispered. Sophia unfolded the letter. She recognized her mother's handwriting. If Sophia hasn't left yet, tell her. Elias was the one who scared us back then. He should have been punished, but he ran away. And now she's with him. Let her do what she wants. But if she ever sets foot in this house, I'm leaving. Her sister stared at the floor. Did you know? Sophia asked. But now, I do. Sophia felt no pain. There was no anger, only heaviness. Her body suddenly stopped holding her flesh. She walked over to Elias. He looked at her as if he understood everything. But he didn't ask either. I didn't know, he said quietly. So, I just left. I saved myself. And I saved you without knowing who you were, she said. That doesn't change anything. But it changes everything. Her sister stood in the doorway. She was trembling. But she didn't leave. Sophia exhaled, deeply, long. It's over, she said. But it was clear. This was only the end of the old Sophia, and the beginning of someone who would no longer be afraid of the truth, even if it was like a knife. The next day, they came again. There weren't 4 of them anymore. There were 7. On horses, in overcoats that reached the ground. One of them was holding a piece of paper. Another knew her name. Sophia, he said, as if tasting the sound. You hid him. You didn't report him. You're part of it. She stood at the door, not wearing a headscarf, not cowering. She stood straight, her hands at her sides, as if she were on trial or about to be shot. Elias was sitting inside. Tomas hid him behind some buckets. It was pointless, of course, but he did what he could. One of the soldiers came closer. He put the paper on the table, next to the bread. You have a choice, he said. Tell us everything and go. Or, stay here, but not alone. Sophia didn't ask what not alone meant. She understood. I didn't call anyone, she said, and I'm not hiding anyone. They exchanged glances. And if we find him? Then you decide what's more important to you, the order or the truth. The soldiers left, but they didn't go far. They stopped at Tomas's house. They stayed there for the night. They said it was for the safety of the village. No one slept that night. Elias paced back and forth. He repeated names in his delirium, names Sophia didn't know. Tomas was silent. He didn't even cough. He just stared into the fire as if it were a death sentence. Her sister didn't come. She didn't even glance at the street. And her mother. Her mother sent a message through a girl. Don't let her drag everyone down with her. Her fate is not ours. Sophia sat in the corner. Her insides felt like wet stone. There was no more pain, just a dull heaviness. She looked in the mirror. The crack grew deeper. One face was tired. The other was determined. And between them was her. In the morning, Elias was gone. The blanket was folded. His traces were erased. There was not a crumb or a trace at the door. Only his whistle remained on the nail, the one he had carved. And that was all. Sophia did not cry out. She didn't run. She just sat down by the door and stared at the ground. For a long time. As if it said more than her mother's letters. Thomas didn't come in. He left at dawn. He left bread and a note on the doorstep. This is no longer my fight. No signature, no explanation. Her sister was silent. The family home was closed. The village was whispering. All Sophia had left was a half-empty shed, a cold hearth, and the feeling that she was back on the porch where her things had been left. Only now, it wasn't her father who had taken them out. She had left herself. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from emptiness. There were no cries, no tears, no rage. There was only the realization that everything she had been working for had vanished. Elias had left. Had he saved her? Betrayed her? It didn't matter. What mattered was that he was gone. She took out an old shirt, the very one she had washed in the river. And she tore it up. Silently. Without anger. Simply because it was no longer needed. There would no longer be the Sophia who sought a place at the feet of strangers. He left the whistle. No note. No sign. Just the whistle. Wooden. Silent. As if he had said, "You can hear the music yourself." I am no longer needed. She sat down by the window. The day passed. Twilight crept across the floor like water on glass. And no one came. Not her sister. Not Thomas. Not him. She was alone. Not like before, rejected. But truly alone. For the first time. Not banished. But simply. Without anyone. It was quiet in the barn. Even the wind died down, as if it knew that now was not the time for sounds. Sophia sat against the wall, hugging her knees. The whistle lay on the floor. Her face was expressionless, just a shadow, light as ash. She remembered. Not events. Moments. Fragments. How her mother used to cut her nails when she was a child, and say, "Don't pull, you'll tear the skin." How her father stroked her head when she had a cold. How her sister secretly brought her a stolen apple from the garden where it was forbidden to pick fruit. And then, as if all of that had been erased. One evening, one number, and that was it. Maybe they were right, she whispered. Maybe I should have agreed. Lived with him. Kept quiet. Didn't argue. Listened. Silence answered in agreement. She looked at her hands. Rough. Bruised. These were the hands of a woman who washed floors, hid the wounded, drew water from the well. But who was she if no one needed her? I saved people, not out of pity, out of fear of being empty. Or maybe I didn't save them at all, she whispered. I just clung to someone so I wouldn't fall completely. Sophia stood up. She walked over to the mirror. It was still cracked. Two halves of her. Only now her face was no longer divided. It was whole. No need to please anyone. No fear of losing anything. I was never one of them, she said, as if testing her voice. I was my own. I just didn't know what it was like to be my own master. The whistle lay in her palm. She clenched it tightly, not as a memory, as a full stop, as a door that could be closed. Sophia went out into the yard. The wind hit her face. Not angry. Honest. Clean. If I'm alone now, it means I can choose. Myself, not for them, not for him. Just so I don't disappear. And she took a step forward. The morning came without promises. It just became lighter. Not brighter. More even. Sophia lit the hearth. Without haste. Without anxiety. for the first time in a long time, not because she had to, but because she wanted warmth. On the table lay an empty bowl, a piece of bread, and a whistle. Everything she had left, and everything was hers. Not given away, not stolen, not begged for. There was a knock at the door. She opened it and didn't flinch. Her sister was standing on the threshold. Her eyes were tired. Her hands were empty. "Mother," she began. She left. "Father is sick." Sophia nodded. Simply. "I'm not going after them," her sister added. "I'm here for myself." They were silent for a minute, maybe two. Then Sophia said, "I'm not coming back. I'm not going there. I'm not one of them. I'm my own person." Her sister didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just looked at her. "Can I stay here?" she asked quietly. Sophia thought about it for a long time. Then she nodded. "But not in my corner, in your own." They entered. Together, not as before, the older and the younger, but simply two women who had nowhere else to go. Sophia took the second cup from the shelf. She placed it next to the first. Then she put the whistle in the drawer, not as a keepsake, just so it wouldn't lie between them anymore. She walked over to the mirror. She looked. The crack was still there, but it no longer divided her face. It was just a crack, like a wrinkle, like a sign that all this had happened and was over. A week later, Matteo appeared at the door, her brother, in their father's faded jacket, with the same expression on his face, as if he were carrying a burden, not himself. "Father asks if you're coming," he said. Sophia didn't answer. She just looked at him. "He's weak." "Mother, she's gone. Your sister is with you, so that means we're all that's left." She washed her hands, slowly. Then she dried them on the hem of her skirt. "I didn't come back when you kicked me out. I won't come now when you call me." Matteo shrugged. He wanted to say something harsh, but couldn't. He only asked, "Are you still angry?" Sophia smiled. "Not angry. I wasn't angry. I was holding on to myself, so I wouldn't disappear. You all tried to erase me, not out of hatred, out of fear. But I stayed. And that's enough." He looked away, silently. "I waited for you to forgive me," he said quietly. "And I don't expect you to understand," she replied. "I'm just not asking for a place at your table anymore." He left. His sister stood in the doorway, watching. "You knew he was coming?" "I knew," Sophia nodded. "But I didn't know it would be so easy." She went to the table. She cleared away the second cup. Not because she was sending him away, because she didn't want to repeat the past. Everything would be different now. I spoke because I was silent for too long. And now I'm speaking. To myself. To them. To the world. Her sister took her by the hand. "What if they come back?" "Then I'll meet them. Not as an outcast, but as the one who stayed when everyone else left." The morning began again with a trough and water, only now it wasn't icy. Sophia scooped up a ladleful and poured it into a bowl. The sun slid across her hand, a gentle reminder that winter was retreating. The stove was burning in the corner. Thomas never returned. Her sister slept on the floor, curled up like a child. Sophia baked bread, without haste, without worry, simply because now she could. The same jacket hung on the wall, old and stained. Only now it was not a ghost of the past, but a sign that everything had been lived. Everything was in its place. She walked over to the mirror. The crack still divided the glass in half, but her face was whole, not crumpled, not burnt, just real. The whistle lay on the table. Elias hadn't come back. He hadn't written. But Sophia wasn't waiting anymore. She didn't close the door behind him, but she didn't leave it ajar either. The wind blew in from outside. Inside, it was quiet. Not like before, when silence meant indifference. Now, silence meant that everything had been said. Sophia sat down by the window. She picked up the cup. She took a sip. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to expect nothing. No approval, no forgiveness, no recognition. Because she already was. Completely. Unconditionally. If you watched until the end, you felt what it means to remain human when everyone has turned their back on you. Write the word "remained" in the comments if you also believe that strength lies not in loud actions, but in the silence of choice. And if this story touched you, share it. Someone is living in a shed like that right now, waiting to be understood.